this is Monique. Welcome to One Mo Project. This is the final project using Dawn's wedding dress. This is a rehearsal dress for Courtney to wear the day before her wedding when she does the last little bit of things, does the rehearsal and then rehearsal dinner. I let it out just a tiny little bit so that Courtney, could breathe. That was one of the things she wanted. Also, she wanted the, the hideous sleeves to go away. Anyway, I changed up some things for her, but at the end of the day, it's still her mother's dress, and I'm very excited that I got to be a part of that. Let's see how it goes.
I started the transformation while Courtney had the dress on. She didn't like the neck, she didn't like the sleeves, we changed the length. I cut all that while she was wearing it. But since I cut it while she was wearing it, it needed a little more straightening. You can see how I sort of missed there on making them even. So I folded in half, being sure to match up where the seams are so that I could smooth all of that out and get it straight. It wasn't a terrible job considering she had on the dress while I was chopping it off, but it still needed a little more attention before it could be finished. And then I have to pick at it here some more. I don't know, this is so special that we're going to get to reuse the wedding dress. So, right there too. So now I really like how that comes out. So for the lining part, making this part simple, I set up the serger with the rolled hem and just went all the way around it once. Sped that up a whole bunch because who wants to watch that? But this is where you have 3 threads on the serger and it's just overlocking it, and that is done for the lining hem. The skirt hem though, I did it around on the serger the same way with the rolled hem foot to make it finished, but it leaves it just a little ragged on the edge when it's done that way. Not so much for the lining fabric, it was just a tighter weave, but on this top satiny fabric, it left it that way. So I did it with the rolled hem from the serger and then pushed that out of the way and then folded it just one time with the regular sewing machine. Of course, I had to have some thread there. But just one time folded over to make a really small hem all the way around this top layer. And it takes a minute to get all the way around. I'm sure it was worse when it was the whole thing, but even now it's a long way around because of the difference in the front hem and the back hem. But I think the high-low was such a cute thing, and I loved the sound that it made when she twirled in it and the way it fit her. It was so nice to do the high-low. Anyway, one time folded over for the hem on the outer layer of the skirt. Here again, because I cut the sleeves off while she had on the dress, I had to work it some more to get the rest of that fabric off. But I wanted her to be able to see it and have an idea of where we were going with it while she had it on. But I picked off the rest of the sleeve part of the seam, but I did not pick off the part that had been across the upper part of the bodice. I wanted to leave that there until I was completely done so that I didn't make the lace too weak. And then on top of that, I also added a thin piece of ribbon underneath the lace to give it a little more strength. Since that's the only strap she was going to be having, I thought it needed a little extra support, a little extra something so that the lace didn't give way while she was wearing it. I wanted it to look good. So this was thin enough to be completely hidden underneath the lace, but I sewed that right on the place where the sleeve seam had been and then overlapped it onto the bodice just a tiny bit to make it secure. Then I was able to go and cut off the extra tulle that had been the upper bodice. While I'm cutting on that, let's talk a minute about storage. If you're into crafts like I am, storage is an issue. So this is how I store ribbons, buttons, thread by color. Neutral colors, warm colors, cool colors. So that's my neutral color ribbon box. Now that's finished there, trimming off, there's also across the bodice front and the bodice back where I trimmed off the tulle that had been on the original dress. It didn't have to be completely removed, which was fine, but a little bit filled in the gaps, but it had to be removed enough that it didn't look funny. Here at the very middle of the front, I didn't know how well that lace motif was going to stand up once it didn't have any tulle in it. So I made sure that it was going to be okay, and when she tried it on for me, I had scissors just in case it was falling over or looking weird, but it really did fine. So as thin as Courtney is, Dawn was still thinner than that when she got married. So Courtney needed just a little. It wasn't like she needed a whole size bigger, but she needed a little more space to be able to breathe. So I was able to move the zipper over a little bit. Here you can see I'm able to get maybe 1/4 of an inch out of one side by moving the zipper over, sewing it down, and then going back and redoing the top stitch on it. But it was enough to be helpful, especially at the waist. Dawn was a baby. I mean, look at her. Did you see the pictures? She was a baby when she got married. And she's still married, happily married, but she just was still a baby. So the dress needed just a little more. So there, maybe 1/4 of an inch out of the one side. And then on the other side, it was a side lap zipper. So I sewed it on a different way on each side. That's why one side I started with it out flat, and the other side, the salvage edge is folded in. But I was able to get maybe another 1/4 of an inch. So I was able to get a 1/2 an inch into the bodice, especially through the waist, so that Courtney, when she wears it for her rehearsal and for her rehearsal dinner, she'll actually be able to, breathe. And then at the dinner, she'll be able to eat something, to sit down. So see there, another 1/4 of an inch to make it just a tiny bit bigger around through the bodice. Not much, but enough to help Courtney to enjoy the dress instead of it just squeezing. Now for the buttons. The dress originally had buttons in the top of the back on the tulle part, but since that was gone, we had to do something different. I cut away the extra. I left them all on there. I didn't take them off. I didn't want to have to sew them each back on by hand. There was one missing that I had to replace, but one is still better than all of them. I sewed the extra length of the tulle that I had left on there back over on itself, just to help give it a little more strength and to give me something to sew to attach them without having to actually go and catch each of the buttons all the way down. And once I had that tacked down, I was able to sew the buttons to the back right there at the zipper. This also helped to hide the fact that the seam where I had let the zipper out a little bit was still a pretty hard seam. Even ironing it left a little bit of a crease, and this helped to hide that. But I sewed the buttons on, so I sewed down one side of them. Oh, after I sewed that one on the top. I sewed down one side of them, just doing a quick little slip stitch by hand. Because they don't have to be super strong, because they're not actually going to be buttoned and unbuttoned. They're just for decoration. But I still slip stitched so that you couldn't see the stitches, and worked my way down one side of them. And then once I got to the bottom, I was able to make sure that they were looking good before I came back up the other side. So I zipped it up and gave it a quick look to see if they were gonna look crazy or something. And I thought they looked really fun. So then I had to go back and sew all the way up the other side to help keep them from laying off to the side, to help make them lay even. So even though from a distance they'll look like it's buttoned, and some of the people will think that this dress buttons up. They won't understand what it is, and that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to know everything about how clothes work. Just me. Or just you. I mean, somebody. Somebody out there needs to know how it works. Anyway, so I sewed all the way back up the other side of those buttons so that they would stay pointed out instead of kind of dangling sideways. All right. That looks good. Now, there's one more thing. The underarms are just raw edges because originally, they had the big puffy sleeves that Courtney did not approve of. She did not like those. So I tore it so that it would have a straight edge, and then I used this little notepad to help me fold it at a nice 45 degrees because the fabric was such a weird shape. I couldn't really see that well, so I used that notepad to help. And then I cut all the way across 2 inches from the fold. No, I think that was 3. What do you think? I don't know. Anyway, about 3 inches. And then pin that down and cut that into the 2 strips. What are those? Those are probably 1.5 inches. So the 2 strips that I was going to use to make a binding underneath the arm. But first, look, this dress has a lining, but not an underlining. So that fabric there at the seams is a little bit ravelly, so I used those pinking shears. I don't know about you, when I was a kid, I enjoyed pinking shears. Maybe to the point where they didn't work anymore, because fabric is okay for scissors, but paper can be pretty rough on them. And I know I cut up some paper with some pinking shears when I was a kid. Shh, don't tell. Now my scissors are marked. If they look like regular scissors, they have ribbon on them. Otherwise, they're different colored handles. They're obvious that these are my fabric scissors and you can't use them for anything else. So anyway, I folded the top edge over and then folded that bias strip in half and put it right up at the very top edge of the bodice, right up against that now lace sort of spaghetti strap, and sewed that on, folded in half, so that I could bind off that underarm seam. And we will not talk about the fact that maybe that's not as wide as it used to be. We don't care. We love, love, love that we get to use this dress to be part of the daughter's wedding day fun or day before fun or whatever. We're just glad we get to use it. So anyway, sewed that across there once with it folded and trimmed away the extra, folded it back over on itself and sewed it down so that now the armhole bottom edge is finished instead of having raw edges. Wouldn't that be crazy to leave that and have raw edges there? Anyway, there. See, I just folded it over and sewed it down onto itself. Of course, I did the other side, but it's the same. You don't need to see that. So, there it is. All better. And there they are. Look at that. How fun. Thanks for letting me play. It was fun for me.
Man, that was fun. That is a fun thing for a mom of boys to get to do for a friend. I was glad that I got to be a part of doing something that is so special. Here's some advice. Wives, subject yourself to your husband as to the Lord. And husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. See you next time.